right, guys, I'm going to get started and then we can have some other people trickle in as we get going here. But I thought it was pretty fitting coming off Thanksgiving, change in the market, to start talking a little more about contingent offers for buyers, but also how to navigate them as sellers too. So we'll break this up and we'll kind of take this two different routes. We'll talk about buyers first. We'll talk about why to use contingencies, things like that. And then we'll go to the seller section at the end. And if we run out of time, we'll fit in another section talking about this in the next couple of weeks. So I want this to be interactive. It's one of those things where it's the idea of contingencies. If you haven't been in the real estate market over 2 or 3 years, they may be rather new for you. So the navigation behind them can be it can be clunky. It can be challenging if you don't know how to do it. But let's just start today and talk a little bit about, from a buyer's perspective, what is some of the perceptions when you're talking to a buyer as to why not a contingency or why a contingency? What is the perception of them from the outside, from your buyers, from sellers, from anybody? So somebody jump in and kick that off for us. All right, I'll kick it off. So some of the perceptions.
I got it. I think a lot of perception is this is going to be the worst transaction ever because these people have a house to sell that we have no idea if it can sell, will sell. We don't even know what the house looks like. Put that one in the back of the stack.
Backup stack, worst offer ever. All right, somebody else jump in.
I'm going to piggyback on what Craig said. So basically when I see a contingent offer, it's like, well, in a market where we can't sell a listing right now, that's, maybe priced a little high or maybe it's not in the right part of town. How can we trust that this contingent offer is going to get their house sold so that we can move forward with this other offer? And it also handcuffs you to that contingent offer should another better contingency comes in. And a better contingency might just be a house in a better location that's more of a slam dunk.
Yep. Anybody else? I've got the words down, non-committal. So like, hey, if you don't sell your house, if you're not fully committed to selling your house, you get an easy out. You don't lose anything as a buyer. So the seller gets somewhat a little bit tied up by it. It may not work. They don't have to be as committed. Maybe that buyer's not as strong financially. So you start telling yourself the negative story about the buyer. Is this buyer actually able to buy my house? What are they going to be like when the inspection comes up, right? Some of the negative things you start to tell yourself. And then the last thing is, yeah, even if they do sell their house, how long is this going to take me? This is going to tie me up forever. I just had a property over the weekend. Over Thanksgiving, we got a contingent offer on it. They had a 60-day contingency to sell their house. And then talking to the client says, well, Alex, 60 days to sell their house. And then at least 30 days to close out. We're looking 90 days out. We're all the way into the middle of February. That's the worst case, right? Or they don't sell it and you're tied up for 60 days, right? So you start telling yourself the worst case scenario, bad financing, bad offer, bad deal, the worst, right? That's the perception of it. But if you have a buyer in the market right now who's coming to you and says, Alex, I have a house to sell. I need to sell my house first, but I don't want to be homeless and I don't want to move into short-term living. A contingency can be massively beneficial to that client. So instead of telling them, hey, it doesn't work, over the last 2 years, I've had clients that have asked about contingencies, and the conversation is, look, you can't write them. They will be, as Craig put, to the bottom of the stack, right? So why are they beneficial for a client? So let's get into that a little bit. This can be more interactive. I'd like for some of you guys to jump in and provide reasons why you believe a contingent offer is beneficial to the client. And I have some notes here, so you guys jump in and start, and then I'll piggyback off of you guys. All right, I'll give the first one. Gosh, slow crowd this morning. Everybody's still got tryptophan in their system. I have risk. Buyers don't want to get stuck carrying 2 mortgages. So this is a way to avoid that. Somebody else jump in.
I
I
think
think,
he's trying to tell us
oh, go ahead.
something.
Go ahead, Daniel.
You guys can't read my sign language?
Yeah, we got it.
Just
We
kidding.
picked that up. That was really
No,
helpful.
Mia was trying to say something. I think she was going to say what you were saying, but I'll let her echo it. Okay. Are you getting feedback if we leave
No,
it on mute?
You're good.
Okay.
Thano, do you have one?
Yeah, I think from a buyer standpoint, it's less stress, for your buyer to stay in the right headspace. It's sometimes they don't want to take on, like I said, the two mortgages, but I think from a stress and a mindset place to make sound decisions. Back in January this year, one of my closings, like it was a contingent offer because they had to sell their home. And it was one of those things that said, yeah, I mean, they could do it, but he wasn't comfortable taking on the two mortgages. So he said, yeah, we'll buy it, but my rule is I have to sell my house. I don't want to carry the two mortgages because that's a lot of money. So I think from a standpoint of, just having your clients in the best mental space, that was probably the best thing for them at that time.
That's awesome. One of the things I wrote down is it gives you the full answers to everything before you fully commit to anything else. So if you need to sell your house and I want to purchase the house up the street on 123 Main, and 123 Main is going to cost me $500,000. And as a home buyer, I believe that I need to put 20% down. So I'm $100,000 in and I have $20,000 in the bank. I know that I need to net $80,000 or I can't do the financing that I want to do. So then I need to shift my plan or I can't execute the plan I want to do. And if that doesn't work while you're selling your home, it helps you determine, one, how bad you want to buy the contingent house that you're trying to buy. And two, do you need to find additional equity or do you need to finance that purchase differently? And three, is it something you can even do at all? So it gives you an opportunity to capture a property, think it through, and get all the answers of exactly what's going to happen. Over the past, I would say, couple months, if you were writing a contingent offer, you can see that people don't know what they're going to be selling their home for. They may think they know, but what they think they're going to get and what they actually get could be vastly different. And it could put that home buyer in a very poor position moving forward financially, if they choose to do that. If it doesn't work out, they can always put their hand up and say, stop, this isn't going to work. We're out. We'll let the contingency expire unless we can get X amount of dollars for our house. I love the idea of it pulling the stress down in a market where there's a ton of negative conversation centered around everything financially in the world right now. Gas prices, interest rates. It's trash that people talk about every single day. It's negative, negative, negative. The person that's incredibly risk averse is going to put their hands up and say, I'm not doing this. I'm not playing ball here. However, if you can find a house that's been on the market 30, 60, 90 days and a seller that's super motivated to sell, you can see a history of price reductions. There's an opportunity as a buyer to go in there and say, hey, I'll pay you this. I'll pay you 75 cents on the dollar, and I want to sell my house. And that seller may have no other options, right? So that's where something becomes massively beneficial to the person that's risk averse to say, look, you can dance around all the risks that people are talking about. This is how you beat the elevated interest rates. All right, talking a little further. How do you determine presenting these to a seller? How do you do it? What's the language like? What's the offer look like? What's the conversation you're having with the agents on the other end of the phone? One, to protect your client, and two, to position them as best as possible to advance a transaction forward. Because if the perception is worst offer ever, going to tie me up forever, bad deal, bad house, haven't seen it, don't know, how do you present that to the other agent on the other side of the transaction to help them go, you know what, this is a good idea. We should do this.
It's not quite answering your question directly, but what I think we need to be aware of is that sometimes we're dealing with one right now where a house gets under contract, contingent, and then you're kind of throwing the house on the market. Like the contingent buys, the contingent buyer's house is getting listed, quickly. So if you're the agent, the best way to represent that property is to know all the facts, the average days on market for that neighborhood, that price point specifically. Are we pricing it competitively? Are we still trying to hit a home run? Is the house show ready? All those things are important. So if you can show that value to the listing agent of the house that you're trying to buy contingent, that your ducks are in a row, that you're ready to go to market within a few days, I think that's going to give them a lot more comfort to say, yes, let's give this a shot. Also, you're probably our only buyer right now. So, let's work together to get both of these deals to the finish line.
Daniel, you nailed my entire list. I have nothing else to talk about. But seriously, so story behind that, property I have listed on 46th Street in Meridian Kessler. We have reduced it down. We're competitively priced, and a buyer comes in and they say, Alex, we're gonna make you an offer $35,000 below ask. We're gonna have a contingency tied to it. Alex, man, your chimney's got a problem. Man, you don't have a sump pump in the basement. And gosh, I mean, holy cow. And I'm just like, are you going to buy this house? Like, you're giving me no comfort here. So he goes back. I'm like, why don't you guys go schedule a second showing? I'll look into some of those concerns you have and see if we can like pair together to tackle this and put together an opportunity that's beneficial to both your buyer and your seller. He's like, okay, great. Comes back for a second showing, and in flies an offer. So I get him on the phone. I'm like, hey, like, let's just talk through this. One of the things you told me is like, your home was a quick sale. Why do you have 60 days for your contingency? Well, Alex, Christmas. Mind you, I'm talking to this guy about negotiating a contingent offer on Thanksgiving. So like, you're buying a house on a holiday. You're telling me nobody can buy a house on a holiday. So like, this keeps going. He starts picking the house apart. He picks the house apart. Alex, it has this. Alex, it has that. Man, I don't know. And so the conversation back is, hey, look, like, we appreciate your interest and we appreciate your persistence in coming out and wanting to purchase the home, but I don't feel good about this. And when I go to my client who's been put on and off the market twice now, my advice to them is it's very challenging. There has to be something that you give us in return to make us feel like we're getting some sort of win here. So one of the things I wrote down for a buyer's perspective is the value of this whole contingent opportunity is the money that you pay versus the time and the terms that you offer to get those things. That's how you determine the value of what a buyer's contingency is really worth. Sometimes you do have to pay more money to say, can we pause your house? Can we tie it up for a minute? Can we hold it up? But we'll do A, B, C, and D. And it gives us time to sell our home. If you can generate the time to sell your home, you're limiting the risk. And if you can say, I can limit the risk at a financed rate of $5,000 over 30 years, that's worth it to me. Okay. That's how you approach that from a buyer's perspective. So that's one thing to consider while you're talking to your buyer about going in and doing this, is to say, hey, look, like, we can give you all the time you need. It may cost you a little bit more money financed over the term of your loan. Something strong to consider when approaching these, because if you can go to the seller and say, we are going to provide more of something for you, they may be less inclined to fight you over the idea that you may be tying their house up. But you have to give that person some sort of victory to go, hey, Mr. Seller, we're here to provide something for you. We want to make this work for you. We love your home. Nothing a seller loves more than hearing that a buyer loves their home. But when somebody comes in and hacks it up and complains about it, and, well, it's got this, well, it's got that, well, you should go find another house. Get out of here. Right? So let's pivot a little bit and we'll transition over to the seller side of things. As sellers, what questions are you asking about the buyers that come through? And Daniel, you hit on this a little bit. So we'll kind of merge all this together. And one of the things you'll notice is like handling these all together. and it's something that we talk about often. It's a universal conversation about how do you work together as a group of agents to get a buyer and the seller to the same destination that they want to go to. A contingency is an opportunity to delay the schedule of where you want to go and how you want to get there. May take a little longer, but it's the agents that are the people that need to hold it together and run the communication together. So some of the stuff that I have to ask for, how much time does a buyer need to prep their house? Where is the house? What price are you going to be on your house? Like Daniel said, what are the average days on the market that the house needs? What is the condition of the house? So you could look at average days on market and say the average days on the market to sell your home is 30 days, but the condition of the house could be a 3 out of 10. You're not average. You're not going to fall into the average. It's not an average time of year. Some of that data is skewed and it's inaccurate. So
Austin's always talking about how we need to speed or to slow down to speed up, right? Is that correct, Austin? Slow down to speed up. So, I mean, for example, like if you have a house that you walk through and you're like trying to slam it on the market after you've gone under contract for contingency and it's just not ready for market, well, just throwing it on the market and hoping for a Hail Mary is more than likely not going to be the correct approach, because what's going to happen is you're going to be behind the 8 ball already. So instead of doing that, you know, what you could do is get the house ready. It might eat into a couple of your 21 days or whatever you're under contract for, but the house is now clean, presentable. So even if it's only 1 or 2 buyers that come through that first weekend, your house is presenting so well that maybe that's all it's going to take, rather than you getting feedback consistently that your house is not ready for market, that it smells like a pet or whatever that looks like.
And I piggybacking on that, Daniel, some of that is doing your due diligence and having a very candid conversation as an agent to agent, and just saying, other agent, if you're listing this property and we're going to accept this contingency, what are you doing? What have you done to set your client up for success?
One thing I think that goes super underrated, if you're going to be out showing houses to a buyer that's going to be contingent on a sale of their house, while you're doing that, and sometimes it may happen really fast and they want to see one house and they write an offer on one house and it freezes everything. That makes it a little challenging. But the other side of it is if somebody calls you and says, hey, I want to start looking for houses, but I need to sell and I'm contingent. One of the first conversations you should be having is your house prepared to sell? So when you have a seller and a buyer comes in the door, ask those questions back to the other realtor. How much time do you need to prep your house? How ready is your house? Have you taken pictures of the house yet? Or like Daniel said, are you going to try to slam this thing on the market, tie us up, and then sit there overpriced and underappreciated and undervalued in the market? The other side of the question is, when you talk to people right now, think about this was if you were running the sale, if you had the listing, getting the list price from people is super interesting. I talked to an agent this morning who said, I'm getting ready to prep a house to put it on the market. It's burning a hole in my seller's pocket. He wants to list it at 215. I told him initially it was 200. We're trying to figure it out. And I'm like, you got to skate to where the puck's going, my friend. I would list the house at 200. He's like, that doesn't leave a ton of meat on the bone. I said, then you try it at 215. And if you can't sell, then you need to get it to 200. So if they come to you and they tell you what the price is, or they say, we're going to be somewhere between 200 and 215, and they're on the high side of that, I would squeeze that contingency time period down so your seller's not as tied up for as long. And it forces that buyer to get serious about how they're going to treat the selling of their house.
Alex, I think you had mentioned this in one of our meetings, and maybe it was Austin, I can't remember, but somebody said if they want to start at 215, get ahead of the conversation and put in the contract that in a week we're going to come down 5,000, and if it doesn't work, then in another week we're going to come down another 5 or another 10, and get it to that number where it needs to be ahead of the deadline of your contingency where it expires. And so the plan is already in place. Hey guys, we'll try it at your number for this weekend, but Monday we're going to drive it $10,000, whatever that is.
And what that does, guys, is if you're active and you're doing those things as the agent, you get to call the agent on the other side of this transaction, say, here's how committed my client is to purchasing your home. And as a seller, asking those questions, what are you going to be doing to get your home sold? We have 3 built-in price reductions in the first 3 weeks on the market if we don't get it sold. That's how bad my client wants to buy your house. What inevitably happens, guys, is when you run out of time and that contingency ends, A buyer's going to go, is there a chance to keep us still in the fight? And the seller is going to say, is there anything that we can do to extend this out? Because I still love the idea of having this person buy my house. This is still the right buyer for us, or we're in a great position because of this. Those are the conversations that you get to be having back and forth that will help you position the house, but also stay ahead of the, well, we haven't done anything and we're still sitting here and you don't want to reduce your price and you still want to buy it. The seller punted us, we're out.
Mhm.
And now as a realtor, because you weren't proactive to ask the questions, or for a buyer, the buyer is going to get mad, the seller is going to get mad, and who are the people to blame? That's us. So those are the things that we can be doing to be more proactive about the whole process.
Can I ask a quick question here? I'd love to know just from the group here that I'm seeing of everybody that's on, unmute your mics, my friends. What are you doing to control the narrative? As a realtor, when you receive an offer, are you just accepting that offer or countering price or inspection, or are you also controlling the narrative in other ways of things that you're countering back that are important to the overall process of the transaction?
So I'll jump in because I just have one of these, and it's really has to do with the whole package of the offer. So let's say hypothetically you get something that has unappealing terms across the board, bad price, long timelines, mediocre financing, tons of closing costs, a lender you don't know, something where you're just like, ugh, makes me want to throw up. But it's the only ticket in town and something you got to talk about. That conversation to the agent is, look, what's the most important package of this to your client? They want 60 days to sell their house. They want 30 days. They want to pay less. They're only pre-approved to this. Okay, that's fine. Here's what we're going to do. So you take that conversation back to your seller and say, here's the data that I have. Here's the offer. Here's what he told me. Here's what she told me. Here's everything that I have. What's the most important thing to you as a seller? And oftentimes what you'll find is sellers will either say, I want this house done and off the market immediately, shrink the timeline, or if you can get me enough money, I can wait for anything. Somebody else jump in. Austin, what are you doing?
Controlling the lender narrative is a big one for me. If somebody's coming to me with a lender that is subpar or that I've had unpleasant experiences with, I have in my tool belt the ability to then go to my client and say, listen, this is the pre-approval letter that they've brought to the table. If they're bridging something or bridge loan or what have you, this is the experience that I've gone through with said lender in the past. How do you feel about responding to them and asking them to either one, change loan type, two, change lenders?
So that's a good one. The other thing, and you and I talked about this yesterday, so it's fresh on my mind, but you want to put some skin in the game. How about some non-refundable earnest money to somebody that has a contingency? The reason and the route that you would take, there's two different forms of contingency paperwork that you guys will see come across your desk when you get these offers. One is a first right contingency. And what that does is it allows somebody to come in, you stay on the market as active first right, and you can still market the property. You can still do all the stuff. You can do price reductions. You can still run that listing. But the thing that it does is if another buyer comes in and puts in an offer, that first right contingency has a period of time that the original buyer, number one, has to make a decision if they're going to buy the home. And so one of the questions I always ask when I get a first right contingency is, if another offer comes in, can your buyer even exercise the first right? Will parents co-sign? Will somebody else jump in and pay for it? Will they cash investments accounts and buy the house with cash? Oftentimes the answer is no, but those people want that 48, 72-hour period to throw their Hail Mary. One last massive price reduction, one call for help. Oh, we're almost there. Please hold on. For that,
Yeah, it comes back to how much do they love it, right?
How
Do
much
you
do you
really
love
love it, or do you just like it?
Yep. And then the other one is a limited right contingency. And what the limited right contingency says, house stays active, you can still market it, you can do all the same things. It says that the buyer has no opportunity to purchase the home without doing that, without selling their property. Okay, they have no chance. And this gets overlooked and often unused because really it does nothing for your client. Writing a limited right contingency puts a hold on a property without really any gall behind it. It's a pretty weak offer form, but it helps your buyer feel like, oh my gosh, we need to get moving on the idea of selling our home. Okay. If somebody's writing offers like that, let's say hypothetically you have somebody that says they can't get financing approval without the first right contingency, but they want to do it because their parents may help or somebody may help. What you can do as a listing side is you can say, hey, look, we'll entertain that and we'll give you that 48 or 72 hours, but I'd like 50% of your earnest money to be non-refundable. Oh, well, I don't know. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you need to have it? That's who we want to work with. And you have to be selective about these conversations, right? If the terms of the offer are great and the contingency period is short, or the offer price is exactly what your seller wants, delay gratification, sometimes it's the only ticket in town. And that's one thing I've wrote here a lot is when you have a seller that's dealing with this, a lot of sellers right now are going to say, well, this offer sucks. Yep. Sitting on the market sucks too. This is the only person that we have that's the opportunity to come in and buy your home. I need you to delay your gratification and how far to the end you can wait. You don't have any other options. And those are the conversations that you need to be willing to have to them. Can you improve some of the other terms to make them go, fine, I can hang on for a little bit. I can make this work. So one thing I wrote down here, the seller's win in a contingency is rooted in the time it takes to close, because they're always going to tell you, I don't want to wait that long, versus the amount of money you get versus the other terms in the offer, just like anything else. How can you bundle that package to make the seller feel some sort of win somewhere to tell that buyer, hey, we'll hang on for you?
Alex, so let's pivot back a second. I'm just curious
Yeah.
what your thoughts are. When you're representing a buyer who maybe you're on a buyer consult and you're talking and she's like, hey, I've got to sell my house. That's where all my down payment money is at. And I can only afford this much, but I want to look at houses that cost more because I'm hearing you can lowball people right now. How do you guide that conversation with, hey, look, I realize that this is becoming kind of a buyer's market, but we also need to be understanding that our offer, can't be a win-win-win for us. We need to figure out how to package that so that the seller, ends up wanting to work with us, that it doesn't have a bad taste in their mouth as soon as we hit send on the email.
Yeah. So I would ask the questions centered around the idea like, guys, it's important right now. It's a very sensitive time in our market to be a realtor. It's very tough. The conversations that you want to have, the conversations that you've been trained to have over the last 2 to 3 years. Guys, we work for the buyer or we work for the seller, right? So if the buyer says, I want to do this, is there an opportunity to say, hey, look, 123 Main Street's at 250. You want to offer 200 with a contingency, and you want their dog and their china hutch in the in the dining room. Instead of going, no, it's okay to pick up the phone and say, hey, look, so you've been on the market 30 days. I have somebody that is a contingent buyer. They will offer a little bit less, but you know me, I get the deal done. What do you think? Let that realtor tell you. Put pen to paper, man. Let's make something happen. My guy's motivated. We don't know what the seller side feels right now. Some people will fight it and say, I'm not going to do that. And that's okay. It's totally fine. You could tell your buyer, we took the shot, we swung and missed, and that's okay. They're saying we need to be up $25,000 and they'll adhere to the rest of our terms. How do you feel about that? Because oftentimes what you guys will learn in this market as things are getting a little different, what the buyers tell you or the sellers tell you and what they actually end up doing, they're not the same. They're not going to be the same.
I totally agree with that. Like if they say that they need X, Y, and Z in order to move forward with this process, and you present that, and then they get a counter with X and Y, but not Z. Oh man. Hey, we could probably do that.
The other side of the coin is when we've been writing offers over the last couple of years, the time to negotiate them has been squeezed down to almost nothing. Hey, you have 4 hours to respond. Hey, you have 6 hours. We have 6 offers. We have a deadline in 3 hours. Pick one. Well, I want to talk to this guy. Tough, pick one, hurry, go. Hey, buyer, hurry, write it now. If you think long, you're dead. Oh, sorry, it's sold. Now, as this stuff goes on and people marinate in these deals and in these negotiations, it increases the opportunity to people feel bound to the contract that they're negotiating. First house I ever bought, 10 counter offers. I would have fired myself if I was the realtor. But as I got further and further in it, I got to the point to go, I don't really care about all this stuff. I'm just going to buy it. I just want to get this. I'm done. At number 9, I was like, fine, whatever, I'll sign it. But the first counter back and forth, I'm like, no, I need to win. But anyways, while you're doing this and you have the client that tells you all these things, bring them back for a second look, write the offer, schedule another showing, go back in. Their initial perception that the buyer may have or the seller may have about the first offer, as you get closer and closer, that's where the compromise is going to happen. They say a perfect negotiation exists when both the buyer and the seller or both parties involved in the transaction leave unhappy. And then you're supposed to laugh about it, right? But the reality is that shows that both sides are pulling closer to the middle together. That's what a balanced market is, guys. That's why everybody's saying, oh, it's a buyer's market. The buyer has all the leverage. Oh, it's a seller's market. It's a seller. Sellers have all the leverage. Right now, every transaction's different and everything's pulling closer to the center. So it's our job as realtors, if someone has contingency, if someone doesn't, or whatever it is, to say, can we get you a little closer to the center here? So I hope that answers your question, Daniel. Who has other questions or any concerns or anything they want to shed light on?
I want to chime in on something here. I mean, to kind of tie in what everybody's saying, it's communication. I mean, to me, I don't care what the market is. The market is what the market is. I'm doing the same thing. If you don't ask, you won't know. And the worst thing that can happen is they say no. I mean, it's really that simple.
That's the best. That's fantastic. In response to Daniel, the worst they could say is no. So in a day when you're not working with 10 buyers in a crunch to write an offer in 2 seconds, it's important to invest the time back into the clients that you do have. So if you have the buyers and the sellers or whatever it is, to educate them. If you go on a listing appointment, you should be telling the sellers that we may be receiving contingent offers, and then talk through what that process looks like to them. Because if they've bought that house in the last 2 to 3 years, and it's the first house they've ever bought, they're going to have no clue what a contingent offer looks like. They're not going to have any idea what it means. They're just going to think it's the worst, it sucks, tied up forever, bad financing, bottom of the stack. Well, when your stack is 1 deep, the bottom is the top, and that's the only one to play on. Who else wants to jump in here? The one thing I would say about receiving and negotiating contingent offers, read the fine print. Make sure you look through the full offer. We've been so programmed to look at the purchase price, look at the closing date, how much financing are you putting down, who's the agent. There's a lot more detail that falls into place on these things. Make sure you look at them. Make sure you look at the first right contingency versus the limited right contingency. Look at the days that they want to sell the house. There's a box on the contingency agreement that says if the buyer who's going to be listing their house can accept or not accept a contingent offer on their house. You want to talk about a domino mess. Make sure that box says they may not accept a contingent offer on their home. And then look, it may say that, but if you're stuck and you're not getting any showings and they call you and they say, hey, look, I know we're not allowed to accept a contingent offer on our house, but we just got one. We'll reject it if you say no. Then you go back to the questions and play the educated seller. What questions are you asking? How are you doing it? You'll see everything becomes negotiable in these balanced markets. Sellers' motivations, sellers' pain will increase. Buyers willing to compromise will increase. What people think they can get on both sides of the transaction will be consistently changing between now through the spring, summer, and probably over the next 18 to 24 months. So the best thing you can do, as Jason mentioned, high level of communication all the time with all parties that you work with.
Completely agree with that. At the start of that piece, I wrote down relationships matter. Building those relationships and keeping those relationships strong is key. The other thing that I'd like to just throw out as a challenge to the 20 plus people on the call today is if you haven't actually gone in and looked at the forms, contingency forms, do it. Like, you get done with this meeting, it takes 5 minutes. Do them, review them, download them, and save them to your laptop. Know what is in there. To Alex's point, the checking of one box or mischeck of one box changes the entire narrative of the document. So, and how the transaction plays out. So dig in and get in there and actually, one, know where to find the documents, two, know what they mean.
Yeah, so that's interesting you said that. When I got the contingent offer this weekend, the guy said, my buyer can only afford X amount of dollars. And I said, why is that? It's because of a monthly payment that they're going to have. I said, would you entertain a interest rate buy down if my seller offered that to you? You would pay more money for the house. We would buy your rate down to make your payment better. It would shrink down the first couple of years of what your payment's going to be in the hopes that you can refinance long term. Now, whether you believe those are good tactics or not, that's your discretion. And if you think it's good for your buyer, good for you. If you don't, that's okay too. The response was, I don't even know what that is, Alex. Let me educate you. Here's what it is. Here's why you do it. Here's how it benefits your buyer. It's our jobs with the listing side of things to be able to have that tool belt of information to shed that back to the other agents on the other end of the transaction. If we can all work together, remember the goal when these people are coming in, and if you're writing a contingent offer, or you're receiving one as a seller, the buyer wants to buy, the seller wants to sell. Put everyone in the boat together and row to the same destination. Otherwise, you will never get where you want to go, and you'll spin your boats in circles, paddling opposite of each other. Anybody have anything else? Keep an eye on stuff for contingencies, guys. If you have questions and you don't know what they mean, if you're new and you've never negotiated with one, grab somebody and ask for help, because you can put your seller or as a buyer, you could put yourself in a pretty big bind, or you can create incredible gaps of leverage by using these. So be sure to ask for help. Be sure to look for the right details, and then make sure you share those details from an educated perspective with your clients. And if you don't know, ask for help. Me, Drew, Daniel, Austin, anybody here that's experienced them. Luana, you've done this for a long time. You definitely know what they're going to look like. Mike Lauk, you know what they look like. Be sure, guys, ask for help. All right. Thanks for jumping in today. This was fun. Contingencies are great, baby. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. We'll be off next week. We'll jump on in a couple weeks. I'll get the call. I'll let you guys know what we'll be talking about then. And if you need anything in the meantime, or if there's any topics that you guys want to talk about between now and then, feel free to text me offline. Otherwise, we'll see all of you in a couple weeks, and go sell something.